Hi, I'm Jacob with National Fleet Products, and today we're demonstrating the install process of a WM Systems Swivel loading ramp in a Ford Transit. This video will apply to all versions of the Ford Transit, encompassing all roof heights and wheelbase lengths. There is one exception. If you happen to have a rear AC unit on the driver's side, you have been supplied a right-hand swivel ramp with mounting plates to accommodate. Today's install happens to show the left-hand swivel version. However, the install instructions are identical, so please follow along. Today's video is the second in a three-part series. The first video covered the installation of the mounting hardware. This video will cover the mounting of the ramp and the necessary adjustments. The third video will cover the ramp operation, and we will take measurements of the space that the ramp and the mounting plate occupy in the cargo area. As covered in the previous video, the hardware we're demonstrating today is our new no-drill hardware. With this design, no drilling into the vehicle floor is required. There are only a few tools required to complete the installation. For sure, you're going to want to have access to two 13mm crescent wrenches, as well as two 17mm crescent wrenches. And lastly, you'll want to have access to one 6mm Allen wrench. With just these tools alone, you'll be able to complete the ramp install in about 20 to 30 minutes. In order to begin installation of the loading ramp, the first thing I'm going to ask you to do is look around for this bag of parts. You're going to want to open this up. You're going to find what we call a passenger side lock, the mounting shoe for the lock, as well as a small bag with black handle and some bolts. Go ahead, open this bag up that contains the black handle and those bolts. You'll notice there's going to be 4 bolts that are nearly identical with provided washers. And then there's going to be one bolt that's a little longer with a nut already threaded onto it. This is going to be a limit, and the first thing I'll ask you to do is just to get this threaded right into the side of your shoe. Doesn't need to particularly go in a manner other than you'll need to adjust this later, so it's a good place to get this in and give it a home right now. It fits a little tight, so if you want, you can take that 13mm wrench and go ahead and turn this in a little bit. The next thing you want to do right away is take your black handle. I'm going to ask you to take your finger in here and put it beneath the threads. And we're not quite sure which one we're going to need yet, so let's just get this started in here. Go ahead and spin the handle in until you feel the threads on your finger poking through on the back side. And what we're going to do is we're going to place this over here on the passenger side. Now you'll notice in this situation we have 2 sets of pre-drilled holes. This is your placement for a 37-inch ramp, and this is your placement for a 47-inch wide ramp. Today we're installing a 47-inch wide, so we'll set it over here, and you'll notice these pre-drilled and threaded holes line up with our foot quite nicely. Going to go ahead and take 3 of the bolts and 3 of the washers. You are supplied with 1 extra for this. Go ahead and just get these threaded in and started. We are not going to worry so much about placement of this at the moment. That will be adjusted later. So just go ahead and get these a little better than finger tight in here. And you're going to be tightening these down with a 13mm wrench as well. Okay, and at this point, we're going to come back to this. I'd ask you to just set this aside over here on the passenger side. Now, in preparation for mounting the loading ramp, I'd like you to look for this next bag. It'll be easily identified by having this yellow nylon block. We're going to go ahead and open this package up. You'll notice there are going to be some foam blocks with some adhesive on the back. Go ahead and set these aside. Those will be used at the very end. And what you're looking for, again, is this piece of steel here with the nylon block. And you'll have found there's also another bag in there with a piece of flat steel and, again, more of these small 13mm bolts. Go ahead and open all this up. This is the hardware that's going to hold the foot of the ramp into position. In order to prepare for installation, I'm going to want to let you know that these do have a left and a right side. You're going to want to match these up so that the plate slightly lies over here to the center. We'll get a photo close up showing the correct placement of these, but these plates will sit right here like this and trap the foot of the ramp in there. At this point, we are ready to stand the ramp up and attach it onto the vehicle. And so what I want to point out is how exactly this is going to work. You're going to notice here on this side where we've got the spring and this blue cylinder, this rectangle is going to sit right here into our welded feet. And the reason we put this shoe over here is this nylon bushing. I want the guy who's lifting this side to try to get this bushing to rest right here into this cradle. And that'll allow it to be placed and stood up really easily, and then we can begin the attaching process. But there is a little more than meets the eye here. What I want to show you or tell you about is the ramp has two leaves, and if you were to only lift from the leaf here that we're seeing, the bottom leaf would want to open, and it makes it quite difficult to maneuver around. So when you're going to lift this, I want you to come and lift from the underneath side and get all the way underneath and be grabbing the bottom side rail. I don't want you grabbing this upper piece because, again, it's going to open up and make it quite difficult. This ramp is going to be quite heavy. It's pretty hard to do one person, so I'd say you'll need at least a second set of hands to lift it up. I've got a helper here today, and what we're going to do is we're going to grab underneath, stand it up, and begin to position it. So let's do it. Okay, at this point, it's relatively stable. You can see our helper is able to hold us. We've got our foot in, and this nylon shoe, or the nylon bracket's in the shoe, and that keeps both sides from moving. So at this point, you can safely allow your helper to hold it and begin attaching stuff here on the driver's side. We're gonna go back to this nylon bracket. We're gonna place this into position. And you'll notice the foot of the shoe has been flushed right up here at the end of our steel blocks. And the same thing is going to happen with this little finger plate. We're going to take our bolts with the washers. You'll have 3 on each side to complete. Go ahead and loosely, by hand, get these in. And again, this one here on the driver's side is directional. It's offset slightly, so make sure you have the correct orientation with that. Okay. At this point, I'm going to want you to have a 13mm wrench handy. And again, this is all kind of loose in here. So what your partner is going to be doing over here is they're going to need to lift up the ramp, take the pressure off it, because right now the ramp is sitting at a bit of an angle. And this foot here doesn't sit quite flat, it's being pitched. So when he lifts it up, it'll bring that foot into level. And what we're going to want to do is tighten these 3 bolts here on the outside, the driver's side. So go ahead and lift when you're ready. And now we'll have plenty of thread left. Let's choke it up again quick. Go ahead and tighten these down. Okay, and now with just those 3 driver's side bolts tightened, we're able to release the pressure, and you'll notice that this ramp now will sit and hold itself nicely. And what we're going to do is finish the installation by tightening the 3 on the passenger side here, these 3 bolts. Okay, the next step in the adjustment process is to ensure that we have this passenger side shoe in the correct placement. Remember, we just threw this in here to give us a place to stabilize the ramp as we stood it up. Now we need to give it a home, and you might be able to notice here that this passenger side of the ramp is set a little far to the rear. It's kicked out a little ways, and again, we only just tightened this up a little bit, so this shoe's loose. If yours aren't loose, go ahead and loosen these bolts up a little bit. But we want to get this more level across the back. So I'm just going to be pushing this in slightly, giving it a new home. And you can look here at the side rails and you can extrapolate, make sure it's just lined up across the back evenly. When the ramp is deployed, you don't want it deploying crooked off the back of the vehicle. So this helps to straighten it up in there. Once you've got your positioning straightened, go ahead and tighten these bolts down. And of course, this is relatively easy to check later, so if you happen to not get this correct on the first try, it can be adjusted again at the very end. Okay, our next step is going to be to take this lock, we call this the passenger side swivel lock. Go ahead and get your ramp out of the way here so we can really work on it. Now that you've tightened everything down the driver's side, this can be hung out of our way. And this simply slips into this fitting as so. And you'll remember we had put our limit on the outside here, and we've got our black handle. Don't worry so much about the limit just quite yet, but this black handle provides positive pressure on the lock. And so what we're going to want to do is get that slid in there. Go ahead and get your ramp over here. You want to lift the lock mechanism, and you'll notice the ramp is sagging. We'll have an adjustment for that later, but we want to get this up and in there. And what we want to do or make sure is that this lock is getting good contact with that nylon bushing. And so that lock is able to be positioned left or right inside the shoe. And so go ahead and float that back and forth. You're going to notice that it is currently a little too far over, so let's wiggle it. Boom, perfect. So at this point, we like where this lock is grabbing the bushing. We're making good contact, and we're going to want to tighten down and make that a little more permanent. So you're going to grab this black handle. You'll notice if you lift up, it's on a spring. This is a kip handle, so it allows you to have a little bit of a ratcheting type effect. So go ahead and start tightening it down until you feel it make contact. And once it's made contact, it gets firmer. Go ahead and pull it tight. And now we can begin some of the adjustment steps. Okay, now that we have our passenger side lock in and we've tightened this black handle down because we've gotten the correct left-right orientation with the lock, what we want to do is go ahead and make that easy for you to find every time. And so the way we do that is we adjust this horizontal bolt here that we'd put in right away at the beginning. This is our limit. And what this bolt does is it comes through and gives us positive contact for when this lock is coming in. And so if you back the nut back most of the way and then start threading this bolt in gently, and you can look and you can see inside here where it's going to make contact. And the moment it hits the plate here for the lock, it's going to stop. And what you're going to do is spin that nut back, put your 13mm wrench on it, and using that nut, make it a locking nut, tighten against it, and now this limit will not move. And so what this allows us to do is we can remove the locking unit, and put it back in, and it hits the same place every time. We tighten the black handle, and this way when we go to return our ramp to the stored position, we know that every single time it's making correct, good contact on that nylon bushing. The next adjustment is going to be helping with some of the drop. And what you'll notice is when we were taking this ramp out, it was sagging quite a bit. You can see here that it is not holding its weight, and that is something that is intended to be adjusted. This ramp should nearly perfectly hold its weight, and so we're going to perform that adjustment next. So to adjust the drop in the ramp, we're going to be here on the driver's side, and this is going to be a slip plate that we're adjusting. This is one of the trickier adjustments, so please follow along and pay attention. You're going to have two 13mm wrenches, and what we're going to do is, if you're looking straight at here, you're going to see there's 3 nuts on the inside. They're horizontal, and they are going to be the first thing you want to loosen up. So go ahead and take your crescent wrench and get it on there and back those nuts off only about 1.5 threads or so. You don't want to really loosen them up. That doesn't do you any favors. So just loosely back these off. Okay, we have our 3 nuts loose. Now, the trick on this is the plate that those nuts touched, that is also threaded. So that nut was actually acting as a double nut. So to get the pressure off, what we need to do is come over here to the bolt head side on the outside, again, these 3 bolts, and back the bolt out. Now you only just have to loosen this slightly. So shoot for about 1/2 thread, 3/4 of a thread, just enough to back that bolt out and take the pressure off. The tools required for this part of the adjustment, you're going to need that 6mm Allen that we talked about, and again, back to your 13mm wrench. And you're going to notice there is a vertical bolt here. On the bottom is the Allen cap head side. Go ahead and get your 6mm bolt Allen in there, and then get your 13mm wrench on top. And what's happening here is, again, this side on the passenger side was low, and so we want to raise it up by tightening this side, and that'll get that into alignment. If the opposite was true, if that side was floating high, you loosen this to drop it. We're only going to want to go about 1 thread or 2 before checking it, so let's just go ahead here and do that together. We can check it really quick. Let's see if it holds. No, there's still quite a bit of drop. Let's keep going. Okay, we are getting there. We're going to go a little further though, and I'll show you why. One more turn, I think. Okay, it's nearly perfect. So what you're looking for is when the ramp is swung out, it should nearly hold its weight. And you'll notice the lock is angled to allow it to help it in there as if a ramp would, but you really want this to hold its weight. So if you were to lift on this lock and slide the ramp in, it should hardly need to use that ramp at all to get itself up and into position. That's what we're looking for, and that's the goal. If you've completed it and that's perfect, you come back over to this side, get your 2 13mm wrenches, go ahead and take the bolt head side first. Remember to run the bolt in all the way. And then once those 3 are in, you go ahead and you tighten the nut side to tighten it all up. Okay, at this point, we're going to be doing another adjustment here. You'll notice the ramp currently is standing pretty straight up and down. I'd tell you you could take a door if you wanted and try to close it. In this case, I know that it's going to make some slight contact with the body there. That may or may not be desirable. For example, you might have shelving or maybe a van life build out there, and you want to have this pushed as far against the back of the vehicle as possible to minimize the space it takes up. That's fine, that's encouraged, in which case this ramp could make constant contact with the door if you wanted to keep it from moving. Most folks don't want that. They want this a little bit away from the rear door. Some folks might want it a lot away from the rear door. For example, in some build-outs, you'll see people hang stuff from the rear door here. So maybe they'd want to have the ramp further in so they'd have quick access to tools or maybe spray cans or whatever you might be mounting here. So to perform the adjustment, it's quite easy. What we're going to ask you to do is go ahead and deploy the ramp. And to deploy the ramp, to get started, it might be a little stiff. We'll fix that adjustment later. But to get it broken loose and free, put a hand right here in the middle of the ramp, press forward with some good force to take the pressure off. And this lever right here on the passenger side, you're going to want to pull towards you to release. That unlocks the ramp. And go ahead and grab one hand on each of the handles and deploy. Look at that, we got a loading ramp almost. So go ahead, get up on here, and you're going to want to go ahead and grab your 13mm wrenches. And you'll notice there is a rubber bumper right here, and now that we've deployed it, a rubber bumper up here. We're going to adjust this one first. This is the one that kind of controls everything, and that one follows along. So over here we've got a nut on both sides. I am going to remove the pressure from the back nut and go ahead and thread this. We're just going to thread this all the way in, and I can show you what happens if we were to do that. You'll notice now the ramp is leaned significantly further into the vehicle and doesn't make contact with the body at all. If you like how you have it positioned here, what we'd want to do is go ahead and even that out. So what I would do is deploy it again, come over here on the passenger side, thread this out, and just like on the driver's side, this one is provided with 2 nuts as well. So we are going to pull one off to even this up. Go ahead and thread it all the way in. Throw that nut on the back. And let's check it again and see what we think now that both sides have been approximated to be even. Beautiful. Okay, again, we can go ahead and check ourselves by closing the door and knowing we're in the right spot. Once you have your angle adjustment in the place that you'd like it, and you think that it's in a good spot, what you're going to want to do is go ahead and swivel the ramp out. And we're going to perform our last adjustment over here, which is the J-hook. Okay, our last adjustment here is going to be adjusting the J-hook. And what I want to demonstrate is how this functions and what it's actually doing. It does a couple things here. So this lock that we were using to release the ramp, the first thing to know about is it actually has a movable finger in the middle of these 2 leaves that grabs the leaves and sucks them together so they're not clapping going down the road. But the second thing it does, if you pay attention to that J-hook over there, is it moves that arm. And that hook is your limit for how far the ramp can travel to the rear. And so because we adjusted the ramp to lean further into the vehicle, now there's excess travel and it would allow the ramp to have excess movement in the back of the van. So we're going to want to choke that up. And it's very easy to do. What we're going to want to do is get our 2 17mm wrenches, go ahead and break these 2 nuts free. And because we have it a little low here, we're going to have to raise the nut up. So we're going to lift it ever so slightly until it comes into a little closer alignment. Go ahead and spin the top one, loosely tighten it up. And what you want to do is play with it a little bit. I can see I've got some drag here. You'll notice the powder coat can be a little sticky, and this doesn't need to make positive contact. In fact, you don't want it to make positive contact. You want it to be just below this stud. So go ahead and play with your threads here a little bit. Get it to equalize. And when you think you've got it good, and it's going to move freely, but be just below the stud, I want mine to lift a little. When you think you got it where you like it, very carefully now, grab your 217s, apply even pressure because that J-hook does want to spin as you tighten it. Double check your work. Looks beautiful. Excellent. Now let's talk about these foam blocks. These will have been provided in one of the first kits you opened, and this is intended more of as a backup type measure. If the customer had stored the ramp and forgotten to lock it in the stored position, it would be able to move around and have excess travel and probably make contact with the rear doors. So these are provided with a pre-adhesive backing on them. It is meant to be stuck to the vehicle body. And you're going to want to place it in a position of contact where it will bump up against the side rail of the ramp. And in this case, the ramp has been adjusted to be leaned in. I know it makes good contact here. Depending on how you adjusted your ramp, you might want to have this block higher as is shown here. This is going to be something that you're going to have to decide, and it'll be a little bit of a at your discretion choice, but you were provided two, and the intention is you'd put one on each side. Okay, we're nearing the end of the installation process. I'd like to review a couple of the adjustments with you to make sure everything was done appropriately. So if we can, we're going to go ahead and place pressure on the ramp, take the pressure off that J-hook you adjusted, flip the locking lever back towards us to release the ramp, put a hand on each handle and deploy it. And the first thing that a lot of installers notice when they deploy the ramp is that the hinge doesn't come together. That is nothing to be concerned about. That is just a feature, and it is because the spring is over here on the driver's side putting that excess tension on it. When the load is applied to the ramp, the hinge does come together and no longer is a concern. But that is something that we get a lot of questions about, so I wanted to call it out right away. But going back to one of the first adjustments we made where we positioned that passenger side lock, I mentioned the ramp deploying maybe a little crooked out of the vehicle, and it's really easy to check that now. What we can do is we can measure from the lip of our mounting plate to the lip of our ramp and make sure it's even across. In this case, we're at about 4 1/4 here and nearly 4 1/2 there. So I will bump that shoe a little further into the vehicle to make sure this is deploying evenly, but again, that's a cosmetic thing. This is pretty much nearly there. So with that, that concludes the installation of a WM Systems swivel loading ramp. Again, this was video part 2 of 3. The third section will focus on how to actually operate and use this ramp. We'll give you some tips and tricks, and it'll be geared towards an end user or the employees that are going to be using this, as well as we'll take some measurements that show the space that the mounting hardware takes up inside the vehicle, how much space the ramp takes when stowed inside the vehicle. So we'll do all that in the third video, but if you had questions while you were installing this, and in this section of the video, the ramp itself, please give us a call. We are here to help. You're not doing this alone. Our number is going to be 763-762-3451, and we look forward to working with you. Again, I'm Jacob with National Fleet Products. Thanks for watching.